Hello everyone and welcome to Season 5, Episode 36 of Pro Wrestling's Top 50. I'm your host Travis McNeil, and today we continue our countdown of the top 50 matches in NXT history with match number 15 on our list, which is the match between Cesaro and Sami Zayn from the NXT ArRIVAL event held on February the 27th of 2014. NXT ArRIVAL was basically like the prototype for what would eventually become the NXT TakeOver events. It was a WWE Network special where the stars of NXT would get, this pay-per-view style show that, they can really show the world what NXT is all about. And it made perfect sense to have this match on the card. We've already talked about the 2 out of 3 falls match between Cesaro and Sami Zayn from the summer of 2013. And I mentioned that I think that is overall the most important match in NXT history. And it's where NXT really started to shift from what just felt like a developmental league to basically WWE's version of independent wrestling. This match went above and beyond that 2 out of 3 falls match for me. And this was the one that really made me feel like we were on to something special with NXT. And not that the 2 out of 3 falls match didn't, but I don't want to say it felt exhibition-y, because that's not the right word to use, but it almost felt like there's a novelty of like, you have these good workers that, know each other from the independents, and they'll get to do, some of their cool moves, stuff we've never seen on WWE television, and it was a lot of fun. But with this match, these guys, even though they were the opener of this show, they got a match that really felt like a takeover, what would become kind of the takeover main event, where they got, 20 plus minutes, and they got this time to develop this real story through their physicality while having all of those big moves. And it really did feel like, a vintage Ring of Honor main event or something along those lines, transplant it into the WWE, but it felt authentic in that way. And this was the match where I really went and said, okay, if NXT continues with this, we're in for, quite the ride with it. I said at the time when this match happened that this was maybe one of the best matches these guys had ever had, both against each other or on their own. And watching it back now, maybe that was a little bit of hyperbole for me at the time, but it is absolutely phenomenal, and it's very different than a lot of the matches that they had. And like I said, their matches on the independents were, often these like wild kind of sprint matches. I think of the one that they had at the Battle of Los Angeles. I think of the one that they had in the Race to the Top tournament finals in Ring of Honor. And, they had all of these big moves, but they were, very quick paced and not a lot of time to breathe amongst them. And the 2 out of 3 falls match was kind of like that in a way as well. But this one was a lot more, elaborately kind of paced throughout, and it allowed things to settle, and it really worked for me. I think this is an absolutely incredible match. It's elevated by the crowd. Again, this is where it really started to feel like Full Sail was, kind of bringing all of this energy into the matches, and I've compared these things before, and, people can disagree with this comparison, but, I think, the 95-96 ECW arena and how anything in that arena was so much better because of the environment and because of the crowd. I think, 2004, 2005, TNA Impact Zone, and it was the same thing. You had this crowd that would live and die with the wrestling product that they were given, and it elevated it so much. And then you have Full Sail University, and this was where it started to shift, where they were so invested in these guys, they felt like they were their wrestlers, and therefore they would make as much noise as possible and in turn elevate the product. And I mentioned this the other day, now we have NXT 2.0, and time will tell. But I do feel like there's potential, for the CWC, which, I thought was, for the most part, atrocious through the pandemic, with the NXT presentation. But I really do feel that with NXT 2.0 and it kind of being this developmental system again, you're going to have these fans, naturally gravitate towards their favorites and feel like, they're along for the journey with these wrestlers, and it might create that environment again. But, we'll see what happens there. This match itself, though, is absolutely superb. And it's so good, right? There's these little things, and if you think back to the 2 out of 3 falls match, how, Sami Zayn jumps Cesaro right at the bell with the dive and hits the haluva and goes up 1-0. but ultimately he still lost that match. So here we get a very different start where, both wrestlers are tentative, Sami especially, and we get this stare down rather than them rush into it. And again, it just shows that this is a different match. This is a more mature Sami Zayn that we're seeing in this match than before. And, Cesaro at this point was on the brink of going back to the main roster. So a more mature Cesaro in a way as well. Cesaro was on the main roster, kind of got that, demotion, I guess we'll say, to NXT. He was kind of doing both. But, he was the U.S. champion right away and then, kind of settled into NXT. But here he is, what we all kind of hoped would be this big push. He would, right after this match, win the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal at WrestleMania 30. And I think we thought, Cesaro was going to be, a world title caliber wrestler. And, unfortunately, that's never really panned out. And, as he re-signs his contracts all the time, I cross my fingers that we might still get that because he really is one of the best wrestlers, of I'll say the 2010s and now into the 2020s, for sure. He's incredible and he deserves, to be a main event caliber competitor, fighting for the world heavyweight title. He got the shot against Roman Reigns, that was a great match. But, then nothing comes of it, right? He goes back to the openers and the pre-shows and the losses. But, that's kind of the WWE way, I guess. And, if you choose to watch WWE, I guess that's what you're going to get at this point. It doesn't seem like it's ever going to change. So, with this match, though, they really establish, I talk about this maturity and, Sami Zayn kind of goes for this different approach at the start because, ultimately the rushing didn't work for him. But Cesaro has this maturity where you could tell that he scouted Sami Zayn and he studied that 2 out of 3 falls match because all of the openings that Sami gets in the early goings of this match, he goes for moves that he was able to execute in the 2 out of 3 falls match, but Cesaro has the counters for them. Sami pops off, that kind of like running Hurricane Rana, and Cesaro almost turns that into the Cesaro swing really, really early into this match. Yes, Sami gets the tope con hilo to the floor, but he goes for the crossbody. Cesaro catches him, turns it in the tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, and that was a big turning point move in the 2 out of 3 falls match. But here they are, the opening minutes of this match, using it to establish that, Cesaro has that leg up on Sami in this match here. There's a sequence that I really, really liked in this match where Cesaro just constantly throws Sami Zayn out to the floor. And it's disrespectful, but it also, again, is showing that dominance. And we almost kind of get these head games involved here where, Cesaro is flexing his muscle, both, literally and figuratively, that, anything that Sami is coming with, he is a counter, and he just keeps tossing him out to the floor, and he'll follow him out and hit him on the rails and toss him out again, and so on and so on and so forth. And what I really liked about it, too, is at no point, does Cesaro himself ever go in the ring to break the count and give Sami Zayn that space, right? And we talk about how important space is in wrestling because, if he does, when Sami gets that space, that's where he could start flying around and getting his counters and those things that he does. Sami gets a little bit of an opening where Cesaro is going to start focusing his work on the leg and goes to kind of wrap the leg around the ring post, and Sami draws Cesaro head first into the post. But then again, he makes another mistake. He goes for one of those big time maneuvers trying to maximize these opening he gets, but he goes for the thread the needle DDT, which he hit in the 2 out of 3 falls match. It blew everybody away. But Cesaro just counters it with a big time uppercut here and then goes to work on that leg. He's brutal with it. He's got a great double stomp on it. Sami's so good. He gets an opening with a leg lariat at one point, but of course, he sells the leg. He goes for an enziguri, and Cesaro ducks that and locks in a half crab, which is really great. There's a point where Sami gets the Koji clutch on, but again, he has that leg around Cesaro's neck, and Cesaro's so strong, he's able to turn that easily into a stretch muffler for, a great near submission and a great struggle for the ropes. These little openings that Sami gets, he goes for, like an Arabian press to the floor, and Cesaro catches him and hits a tilt-a-whirl slam on the ring apron. So, a take off that crossbody into the tilt-a-whirl backbreaker. So, again, just showing that he has those strengths and he has those counters. But something that Cesaro makes a mistake on is he maybe he becomes a little full of himself, with his dominance. And he constantly goes for these charges in this match. And whenever he goes for these charges, they tend to kind of work badly for him. He gets low bridge to the floor, and that's what gives Sami the opportunity to try the Arabian press. He charges at Sami in the corner and allows Sami to pop off the exploder in the corner. He goes to charge off the ropes and allows Sami to grab onto his tights and pull him back into the Blue Thunder powerbomb. Getting twos off all of these things and starting to roll and get a little bit of a momentum. They go for a point too where Cesaro, goes in for the charge, but at this point he has learned from his mistakes a little bit. He knows that Sami's going to try to block it, grabs the leg that Sami puts up to counter, goes for the Cesaro swing. Sami turns that into a pinning combination for an excellent near fall, and then Cesaro gets out of that, gets the swing, gets the running European uppercut in the corner, only good for two. Awesome sequence that comes out of this because Cesaro kind of does like the lackadaisical cover, right? Kind of leans his back over him, gets the two, and Sami rolls him right back into a crucifix, which only gets two as well. Then what does Cesaro do? As he pops out of the crucifix, he hits a double stomp to Sami's head. And the reason I loved that so much is this match, was a little less than 2 months removed from the match that Cesaro had with William Regal that we talked about on our countdown earlier. And that move was the death blow, right? That was the move. I don't want to call it a dirty move because it's technically legal, but it was that move where Cesaro maybe took it a little bit too far, stomped on Regal's head, put him completely out of commission, directly leading to the finish of that match. So he hits this double stomp on the head, which has been so legitimized by that, match with William Regal, that it creates this excellent near fall where he only gets two off of it. It's Sami Zayn and it's Cesaro, and they're going to go into some big time counter spots, and they do that here. Fantastic sequence on the top rope where Cesaro goes for the deadlift superplex. Sami fights out, goes for a Hurricane Rana. Cesaro hangs on, teases the Ricola bomb off the top rope, and then as they're coming down, Sami mid-move, Kid Cash to Easy Money style, turns it into a Hurricane Rana, which was and then follows that right up with the Haluva kick too, which is how he won fall number one in the 2 out of 3 falls match. It's for all intents and purposes his finishing maneuver. He hits that and it's only good for a 2 count. So we're rocking and rolling with all of these big near falls. The crowd is exploding to everything. Great moment where Cesaro just starts unloading these European uppercuts on Sami, and he just keeps crumbling after each one. And Sami Zayn, and I've talked about this before, on the independents as El Generico, he was a wrestler that exuded so much physical charisma, and wearing the mask, you really have to learn to do that and use your body because, you don't get that same range of facial expressions as a masked wrestler as you would do that as someone that's unmasked. But without the mask as Sami Zayn, he's so incredible at his facial expressions. And he just, on this moment where he's crumbling off of all of these Euros, he just looks completely wasted, but still trying to claw and fight. And he finally, stands up to Cesaro and starts to fight back. And it turns into this, dog fight with all of these punches. And he pops off a German suplex. And he goes for the Haluva kick one more time, and you think this is maybe his moment that he's going to pull it out. But Cesaro just blasts him with the Yakuza kick of his own, goes for the neutralizer, which was how he won the 2 out of 3 falls match. Sami counters that into another roll-up for a great near fall, and then they go to the cascading Code Red, which was one of their biggest spots that they did in the 2 out of 3 falls match. It always, blows anybody away how they pull this off. These two pull this move off maybe better than any other combination has in wrestling history. And Sami just rolls up over the top, catches his legs, underneath Cesaro's armpits, takes him over for that. Excellent stuff. But what does Sami do? He ends up running into the pop-up European uppercut. That was the move that led to the finish with the neutralizer in the 2 out of 3 falls match. And again, just showing the fight that Sami Zayn has in him. We get a 1 count kick out. 1 count kickouts in wrestling could always go, north or south, depending on, what you're trying to do with them. I've heard wrestlers say before that some of the best advice they've ever been told is to never kick out at 1 because it never gets the reaction that you want it to. Because I think we're predispositioned as fans, especially in the live crowd, to, expect 1, 2, and then the match is either done or it's not. but the 1 count kick out, which is supposed to, energize the crowd and show that this wrestler is just being completely defiant and, is still showing that he has some energy left in him and is, trying to fight for all he's worth and prove that point that he still has that fight. Sometimes it doesn't quite get the live crowd reaction that it's looking for, but as the viewer at home, it can emotionally charge you. And that's kind of what happened here. Even watching this match now, 8 years later, fired me right up that he kicked out of that pop-up European uppercut at 1. Maybe it doesn't get quite the crowd reaction you would expect. It probably would have got a better reaction off the 2. Going back to that advice you see from wrestlers sometimes, but still a great moment that fits the story. But, at this point, Sami, uses whatever energy he has left for that defiant 1 count kick out. He gets nailed with a discus European uppercut, and then it's the neutralizer one more time for 3. At the time that this match happened, I thought that maybe wasn't the right call. Sami lost the 2 out of 3 falls match. I felt like this should have been his big moment to win, especially with Cesaro transitioning back to the main roster. Sami, someone that we expect to maybe get a main event push. Adrian Neville, Pac, whatever you want to call him, would win the NXT title in the main event of ArRIVAL, defeating Bo Dallas in a ladder match. So, the fan in me really wanted to see Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville hook it up. They ultimately would, 10 months later, but we'll talk about that another time, I'm sure. But I really felt like this was Sami's match to win. Ultimately, though, it didn't hurt either guy. It helped Cesaro, again, lead into that Andre the Giant Battle Royal win, although, nothing came of that. And, this match was just another notch in the excellent belt of Sami Zayn that would eventually lead to him becoming the NXT World Champion. We get, a great, post-match hug, a standing ovation for Sami Zayn. The crowd's amazing, with the NXT chants, match of the year chants. When do you ever hear that in the WWE? And it was a really special moment. And the fact that this kicked off NXT ArRIVAL, really set a pace and a tone. If you hadn't watched NXT regularly at this point and checked out this show with the hype it got, you wouldn't have been disappointed. You would have watched this, especially if, you're a bit of a lapsed WWE fan that's maybe turned more towards the independents or what have you. You would see this and think, I need to start watching this again. It was that good. I love this match. You can check it out, of course, on Peacock. If you're outside the US, it's on the WWE Network. You can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube so that you never miss a video. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Wrestling50. And please join me again next time as we continue to count down Pro Wrestling's Top 50.